This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Sai. This morning we're going to learn about the Haftorah of this week's Parsha, and before we do, we're going to establish a very important rule, and this week is really the exception to that rule. And that is, whenever there is a double Parsha, we always lane the second Haftorah, the Haftorah of the second Parsha. That's a rule in general. And obviously when the Parshas are broken up, then the Parsha of the first week we read the first week, and the second week we read the second week. And if for whatever reason you can't read the first week's Haftorah that first week, when you get to the second week, you're going to read the second week's Haftorah, because even if the Parshas would have been together, we would have read the second week. However, there's one exception to the rule, and that is the Haftorah of Achrei Mos Kedoshim. That, when Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are together, you read the Haftorah of Achrei Mos. Haloi kivnei kushim atem li. And even when Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are separate, if for whatever reason you're not going to be reading Achrei Mos's Haftorah the week of Achrei Mos, you get to Parshas Kedoshim, you're going to read Achrei Mos's Haftorah. Even though always we read, when they're together, the second weeks, but when they're Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are together, you read Achrei Mos's, and when they're separate, if for whatever reason you're not reading Achrei Mos's, you're going to read it the week of Kedoshim. So, what is the Navi Amos is the source of this week's Haftorah. Haloi kivnei chushim atem li. You are like a bunch of Ethiopians to me, which is, I don't know, what is Hashem criticizing us, or is He expressing His love to us? What would you say if somebody said to you, you're like an Ethiopian to me? Is that a sign of endearment? Is that a critique? Well, the kesher to the parsha, now, this Sefer Chazon David is trying to explain why it's connected to Achrei Mos. But we're reading it in Kedoshim, so let's see what he says. Hanavi, mamshos bnei Yisrael bnei Kush. The Navi is comparing the Jewish people to the sons of Cush, Achi Mitzrayim, the brother of Egypt. That their punishment will be dispersed among the nations, Kakasav, like it says, I will shake you up and move you among all the Goyim. And this is similar to our Parsha, Shakasav, that it's written in it, Kemasei Eretz Mitzrayim loy sasu, v'loy saki ha'aretz eschem.
Oh, I didn't know it was yours.
Like the actions of Eretz Mitzrayim you should not do, so let the land not vomit you out. So that's the connection it would have to Achrei Mos. Apparently Kedoshim also speaks about the repercussions of Arayos, which is exile, which is similar to what it says in this parsha, in this Haftorah, B'haniyosi b'chol hagoyim. Now it's interesting, the Haftorah from this week's Haftorah, aside from the fact that it's Achrei Mos's Haftorah, not Kedoshim's Haftorah, is one of the shortest Haftorahs of the whole year, which works out well for some people who like short Haftorahs. The Haftorah is, I believe, 9 psukim. It's from Parak Amos, Parak Tes, Pasuk Zayin, to Pasuk Tes Vav. So you have Zayin, Ches, Tes, Yud, Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled, Tes Vav. So you have a total of 9 psukim this week's Haftorah. Now, let's look in the Ramah. There's a very important Ramah. The Ramah says in Archayan Siman Tav Chavches, V'shar Shabbos Hashana, the rest of the Shabbosim of the year, Maftirin Me'ina Parsha, we read a Haftorah similar to the Parsha. Shekayrin Shtei Parshiyos, when we read 2 Parshiyos, Maftirin Ba'achroina. We always read the second Haftorah. Milvad Ba'achrei Mos Kedoshim, except when Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are together, the Maftirin Haloi Kivnei Kushim, the Haftorah we read is, you are like Ethiopians, She Haftarahs Achrei Mos, which is the Haftorah of Achrei Mos. Comes the Mishnah Berurah. Why would we do that? If there's a rule that we always read the second Haftorah, then why would we violate this rule when Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are together and read the Haftorah of Achrei Mos? And the answer is because the Haftorah of Kedoshim is a very tough Haftorah. It's from Yechezkel Perek Chaf Beis, and it talks about uncovering the shame of Yerushalayim. And if we could avoid speaking about the faults of Yerushalayim, we try to do so. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Half Torah shel Parsha Shniya, the Haftorah, the second Parsha, Maskeras Mitayavas Yerushalayim, speaks about the abominations of Jerusalem. Masha'en ken kishehein nefrados. Okay, so basically what the Mishnah Berurah is saying is the reason why we try to avoid the Haftorah of Kedoshim is because it mentions the abominations of Jerusalem. So you'll ask, so then why do we read it when they're separate? The answer is we don't have a choice, because we've already read Haloi Kimnei Kushim by Achrei Mos. We have nothing left to replace it with when we get to Kedoshim. Masha'en Kain, as opposed to Kishehein Nefrados, when Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are separate, Shekvar Karu Haloi Kimnei Kushim Parshas Achrei. We've already read Haloi Kimnei Kushim and Parshas Achrei Mos. Behechroch lahaftir beParshas Kedoshim hasishbait. We have no choice but the week of Kedoshim to read from Yecheskel. Now, that's the...
Yecheskel would be the regular one for Kedoshim. If it's to be avoided, if possible, why is it put in there in the first place?
Well, it's... apparently, it's an important Haftorah. It speaks about the abominations of Egypt that you need to avoid, which is similar to the arayos that need to be avoided, mentioned in Kedoshim. It talks about Ervas Av, Gilabach, Ervas Nida, Eishes Reyehu. But if that could be avoided, in other words, if there is a way to avoid it, we do. If we don't have a way to avoid it, then we have no choice.
I have a choice, I can.
Okay, so now that's the opinion of the Ramah. The Ramah's opinion is we always read the second Haftorah, except by Achrei Mos HaKedoshim. Now, V'hinei HaLavush, Choylek HaRamah. The Lavush argues on the Ramah. And the Lavush holds, V'daitoi, the Gam Kshik Fula, that even when Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are together, you follow the regular rule. And that is, you read the second Haftorah, Koren Haftorah Achroina, the Hainu Shal Parshas Kedoshim. Lavush argues on the Ramah, and he holds when Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are together, you read the Haftorah of Kedoshim. So you see that Kedoshim's Haftorah must be pretty important, because according to the Lavush, we maintain that rule even when they're together. Aval Habach, however, the Bach, Ushari Achroinim, and other of the later authorities, that the custom has become widespread, like Ramah, that even though when there are two parshas together, we always read the Haftorah of the second parsha, but not by Achrei Mos Kedoshim. When Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are together, you read the Haftorah of Achrei Mos. But so far, this is not relevant to us, because this year Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are separate. But it is relevant to us. Because what would happen if Parshas Achrei Mos was Shabbos Haggadah? Say, what? How could Achrei Mos be Shabbos Haggadah? Could happen. It happened in Tavshin Ayin Daled. Achrei Mos was Shabbos Haggadah. So if Achrei Mos was Shabbos Haggadah, they didn't lean Achrei Mos, the Haloi Kimnei Kushim Atemli. Instead, they leaned the Haftorah of Shabbos Haggadah. So then we have to see the next halacha in the Mishnah Berurah. V'hu adin im Shabbos Parshas Achrei Hoya Erev Rosh Chodesh. What if Achrei Mos was Erev Rosh Chodesh? When could such a thing happen? Happened this year. This year, Parshas Achrei Mos was Erev Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh was Sunday, Monday. And what Haftorah do we lay in the Shabbos? Vayemer lo Yonasan Machar Chodesh. We lay into Machar Chodesh. Umaftirin Machar Chodesh. The Maftirin b'Shabbos Parshas Kedoshim Haloi Kivnei Kushim. So we have a Mishnah Berurah which was written for our year scenario. That means like this: when Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are together, then we're going to follow the Ramah and Lane Achrei Mos's Haftorah Haloi Kivnei Kushim. If they're separate, so Achrei Mos will be Achrei Mos, Kedoshim will be Kedoshim. But if Achrei Mos is Machar Chodesh, then Kedoshim is going to be Haloi Kivnei Kushim Atamli. So this week, when the Baal Koreh makes a mistake and starts to read the wrong Haftorah, you're going to be the one to get up and say, sorry pal, You forgot the last Mishnah Brura and Chelek Daled Mishnah Brura. And that is, this week's Haftorah is Haloi Kivnei Kushim Atamli. I would highly recommend that unless you really get a kick out of sort of saving the day and correcting the Baal Koirei, you should probably tell him beforehand. This way, unless you need that public acclaim of being the only one in the shul to know what this week's Haftorah is.
But you're embarrassing the Gabbai. You have to be very careful about the Gabbai's job is to have the right Haftorah.
You mean to tell him before?
No, to get involved when the Gabbai is supposed to be doing that.
Yeah, but
maybe you should tell the Gabbai.
So you tell the Gabbai before. Unless you need that kick of being the one to save the day after he already started reading the there are people who need that, and we don't want to take that away from. Not my congregation. No. So, okay. By the way, this comes from Rabbi Akiva Eger. There's a small note from Rabbi Akiva Eger on Shulchan Aruch. I blew it up, 140%. Look at number 4. Narrowly, says Rabbi Akiva Eger, Duhu Adin Im Shabbos Parshas Achrei Haya Erev Rosh Chodesh. If Achrei Mos was Erev Rosh Chodesh Umaftirin Machar Chodesh, then we're Maftirin B'Shabbos Parshas Kedoshim Haloi Kivnei Kushiyim. So now let's talk about the actual Haftorah. What does it mean Haloi Kivnei Kushiyim Atamli? Are you not to me like the children of Ethiopians? Does that sound complimentary to you? Basically, Hashem is saying you are like colored people to me. So is that a compliment, or is that a criticism, or is that a statement of fact? What does it mean? Haloi kivnei kushiyim atem li. Let's see the end of the pasuk. This is what the Navi Amos says. Noam b'nei Yisrael Hashem. Haloi yes Yisrael halei eretz Mitzrayim. Hashem says, behold, the Jewish people I brought up from the land of Egypt, Uflishtiyim mikaftar, and the Philistines from Kaftar, Va'aram mikir, and Aram I brought up from Kir. So look in the Gemara Ma'ikata number 6. Hainu d'chsev. This is what it means. Shigaya in LeDavid, atun to David asher shar Lashem, that he sang to God, al divrei Kush ben Yemini, because of Kush, the son of Yemini. Who's Kush? V'chi Kush Shemai v'haloi Shaul Shemai. His name wasn't Kush, his name was Shaul. Elama Kushi Meshuna ba'ira. Just like a Kushi is unusual in his skin, Av Shaul Meshuna b'masav. So too Shaul was unusual in his actions. K'yoytzi b'davar ato omer. Likewise, we find, it says about Moshe Rabbeinu, al oidois ha'isha akushas asher lakach, regarding the Kushite woman that he married. It says Gemara, v'chi Kushas Shema was Tzipora Kushas, v'haloi Tzipora Shema, her name was Tzipora. Elama Kushas Meshuna ba'ira, just like a Kushas was unusual in their skin, af Tzipora Meshuna b'maseha. Ki yoytze b'davar ato omer. Similarly, vayishma Evan Melech HaKushi, and the servant, the king of the Kushi, heard v'chi Kushi Shemai. His name was Kushi v'aloi Tzidkiya Shemai. Elama Kushi Meshuna ba'ira yav Tzidkiya Meshuna b'masav. Ki yoytze b'davar ato omer. Similarly, we find, says the Gemara in Moed Katan, Daf Tezayin, haloi kivnei Kushiyim atam li beis Yisrael. You are like Kushim to me, the house of Israel. V'chi Kushim Sheman v'haloi Yisrael Sheman. Elama Kushi Meshuna ba'ira, just like a Kushi is unusual in his skin, af Yisrael meshunin b'maasein mikala umais. So too Klal Yisrael is unusual in their activities from all the nations of the world. So this is not a compliment that you look colored to me. This is not a criticism. It's a statement. It's a statement of accolade that just like a Kushi is unusual, is unique, Klal Yisrael are unique in our actions. So what is the Navi getting at? Hashem has this big drasha that he gives us. You're like a bunch of Ethiopians. What's he trying to tell us? So the Chasam Sofer in this week's Parsha, he says as follows. On the 3rd line in number 7. What is God telling the Jewish people? We are like Ethiopians. Yesh lefaresh, says the Chasam Sofer on the 3rd line, you could explain. Yaduat is known, Taryag mitzvah tzarch l'kayim kol echem Yisrael. Every Jew needs to fulfill 613 mitzvahs. Not every Jew has the same path. One individual is stronger in Torah. This one is stronger in Tefillah. Zeh mitzvah zu, v'zeh acheres. Even though every Jew has to fulfill all 613, but people have, so to speak, inclinations and preferences, and every Jew sort of is inclined toward emphasizing one area or another. Jews are different in their actions, but nevertheless, deep down, everyone has the same kavanah, and that is Lasos Ritzayin Avinu Shavashamayim. Every Jew has the same intention. This one serves God with Bikar Chaylim, this one serves God with Halvayas Hameis, this one serves God with Torah, this one serves God with Tefillah. But deep down on the inside, we're all the same, and that is we all want to serve Hashem. It's the same thing with the Kushi. V'nei HaKushi b'soich evarav v'damay marisai hakol k'moishu b'vnei adam apshutim. Kushim and people from America, on the inside they're all the same. The dam is the same, the atzamos are the same, the ivarim are the same. So on the inside they're all the same. The only difference is the color of their skin. This is a very PC shir. This is the only difference between different types of people are the color of their skin. They're only different on the color of their skin on the outside. That's what it means. The kushi is meshuna ba'oiroi, only in their skin. So too tzaddikim are only different on the outside with their maisim, but on their inside and their kavana, it's all the same. So the Sefer Megadim Chadashim asks on the Chasam Sofer that this pshat does not seem to fit into the Gemara, because the Gemara says not that Klal Yisrael are different from each other, but rather Klal Yisrael are different from the Ummah Yisraelim. Okay, anyway, that seems to be a kasha on this drush of the Chasam Sofer. I'm going to end off, I want to tell you Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz pshat in this pasuk, Haloi kivnei kushim. I'm going to read to you. Hine kushim heim ba mecham aviknan. Kushim, where do kushim come from? Come from Cham. Who's Cham? The father of Kanan. Now, what did Cham do wrong? Cham cohabited on the teva. The Cham chata b'shimesh b'teva. V'cheinenash atzoiv kol adarish u'meshuna ba'orai. Therefore, he was punished that he turned colored. Because he cohabited on the ark, he became meshuna ba'orai. Umidas hatoiva, and the attribute of goodness, meruba midas paranas, is greater than the midah of punishment. Alachas kama v'kama. V'roi sheyir lanu zchus avos kayam v'sa'olam. And it is fitting that our zchus avos should be forever. This is what God is saying. Just like Cush is punished forever in that they're colored because their great-grandfather lived on the Teva and their punishment is forever, there's no way to clean it off, so too the reward of Klal Yisrael is forever and ever. Why? Because you're like the Ethiopians. Just like the Ethiopians are punished forever, Klal Yisrael is rewarded forever. Now the question is, why was Cham punished that he turned colored because he had relations on the teva? What is the?
Was it usher? I wasn't aware that.
It was not. Yeah, it was not. It was not appropriate. While the world was suffering, for him to be involved in his personal benefit. So the Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz explains, why was he punished this way? How is this punishment quid pro quo? How is it midah keneged midah? It would appear that the reason for the punishment of Cham is the name ma mida kol makom hizu sheshimesh b'teva lekachim shchayrim. Because they lived on the teva, therefore they became black. V'gam eved avadim yulechav, and they became servants. Mishum sheshimesh b'teva. What does having tashmish on the teva have to do with turning that color? So he says something incredible. Achei nira hayos yadu, it is known. What stopped servicing during the Mabul? What stopped working? What natural phenomena stopped working? The sun, the moon, and the stars. They stopped. There were no seasons, there's no day, there was no night. The entire duration of the Mabul, the constellations stopped, and they did not service. Now, where does dark color in the skin come from? Where do the pigments in the skin come from?
The sun.
The sun. Right? The closer you are to the equator, if you're born in a country that's closer to the equator, you'll be darker than somebody. If you live in Scandinavia or Norway, you're going to be Vaisa. If you're going to be living near the equator, you're going to be not Vaisa. Right? So, V'zehu amru chachmei ativim shahashachruris ba'adam. Blackness in a person, machmas chayim hashemesh, from the sun. Now, v'cham ratza shia zari meluban. Cham wanted to have white kids. So, therefore, he was very smart. He decided he's going to have tashmish at a time that the sun is so far removed, it's not even operational. That's why Cham had tashmish on the teva, because the sun was out of commission, because he wanted to have white kids. So therefore, Mida Keneged Mida, he was punished that he doesn't have Vaisa Einiklach. Yeah? Lachein Shimesh Be'ez Sha'amdu Amazalos. Therefore, he was punished, Mida Keneged Mida, that his Zarai are Shechayrim. Why Avadim? Hayois Da'amrinon Adam Islay Mazla. We say like this. Why are Behemois Meshubed to Adam? Because we say Adam has Mazel, and Behema doesn't have Mazel, and Behema therefore is Meshubed la Adam. Meaning, anyone who doesn't have a mazel has to be an eved. Kushim have no mazel. Why don't they have a mazel? Because they come from Cham, who is mashamish on the teva when there were no mazalos. So since they have no mazel, therefore they're avodim. That's what we understand. Eibeshutz. Now the truth is, the same way Kushim have no mazel because Cham was mashamish on the teva when the mazalos were not functional, Klal Yisrael also has no mazel. As we know, Hashem, Vayoytze Oisai Achutza, Vayoymer Habeino Hashemayim, look down, Ein Mazel Yisrael. V'yadu the Yisrael Gam Hema L'malam in HaMazel, L'fisha Al Pi HaMazel. Really, based on the mazel, Avram Akar. Avram would have been barren, V'yhoyo Moilid. V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu Magbihigbiyoy L'malam in HaMazel. Hashem lifted him up above the mazel. Kamash Amar HaKasav, Vayoytze Oisai Achutza, Sha'amar Loitzei Me'et Stagnino Shocha. V'im Kein Ein Mazel Yisrael. Uvehechrach Tzricha. That's why Klal Yisrael had to be going to Golos and go down to Mitzrayim and be Avodim. Because if you have no mazel, you have to be an Eved. Say, therefore, Uvehechrach Tzricham Liyos Avodim. That's why at that occasion Hashem said, Va'avodim v'ino oisam da'anei yeshana. V'zeh shekasav. Haloi kivnei kushim atem li. That's why Hashem says, you're like kushim to me. Kamoisha hakushi ein loy mazel. Just like a kushi has no mazel. Kach ein mazel Yisrael. Now let's see if we could take this a little bit further. Who is the first king of Israel? Shaul. What is he called? Cush ben Yamini. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz, V'yuvan behektem ashekasav Yisrael l'shmuel. Oh, v'hinei melech risha nikra Cush ben Yamini. The first king is Cush. V'yuvan, we could explain that behektem ashekasav Yisrael l'shmuel by introducing that which Klal Yisrael said to Shmuel, Tina lanu melech, give us a king, k'chol hagoyim, like all the nations in the world. V'amar HaKadosh Baruch l'Shmuel, and Hashem said to Shmuel, no, they haven't rejected you, but they rejected me. Lo yoischa ma'asu ki yamoisi. V'yacher kach amru anshe b'lial, and then these wanton men said, Ma yoshienu, so what's this guy going to help us? V'alo haya ish chayil. He was a man of valor, v'racha kodesh shara alav, v'roi l'malchus, v'adavar tzarch bior. So, says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz, V'nira, Dihine b'nimusei o akamhu. One of the laws of the Gentiles is Shehim boichrim lehem lemelech mishu ish mutzlach b'mazel shalai. Usually they pick a king who has good mazel, has had good success based on the constellations. V'zehu hayachet Yisrael. This was the sin of Klal Yisrael. Sha'amru, they said, Tenu lanu melech k'chol hagoyim, meaning let's get a king who has good mazel. Otherwise, why is it a sin to get a king? It's a mitzvah in the Torah to appoint a king. So how did Klal Yisrael sin by making a king? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you're rejecting me. You want someone with good mazel? That means you don't want someone under my domain. You want somebody with under the successful domain of a good mazel. You haven't detested me. Kiyam oisi. It's not you, Shmuel, that they rejected. They rejected me. L'fishem boichrem b'mazel. Therefore, Hashem picked an ish yamini. Therefore, Hashem said, we're going to get a Benjamite. L'fi de kol hashvatim noldu b'chutz la'aretz. All the shvatim were born in chutz la'aretz, except for one. There was only one shevet born in the land of Israel. Who? Benjamin. Binyamin noilad b'Eretz Yisrael. And Eretz Yisrael is l'mala min ha'mazel. D'chsiv einei Hashem doiresh oisam mereishas hashana ad achar shana. Therefore, Binyamin had no mazel. Therefore, Shaul is called what? Cush. Just like an Ethiopian has no mazel because Cham lived on the Teva. So someone from Benjamin is also called a Cushite, an Ethiopian, because he also has no mazel, because he was born in Israel. And therefore the people said about Shaul, this guy's not going to help us, because, what do you mean? Shaul's a man of valor. No, but he has no mazel. That's why the people didn't want Shaul when he was appointed at first. They said, Ma yoshienu zeh, because he's not munhag al pi mazel. Therefore Shmuel said, L'chu ha-Gilgal, v'nischadei sham hamlucha. Shmuel said, go to Gilgal. What's up with Gilgal? Perish the feed of Gilgal, malu b'nei Yisrael shenis. We know when Klal Yisrael came into Eretz Yisrael in the times of Yoshua, they went to Gilgal. And at Gilgal, they had another milah. D'chsiv, and on that day that they had another milah, Hashem, the Klal Yisrael said, today we uncovered from upon us the shame of Mitzrayim, because the Mitzrayim said, we see in our astrological signs a sign of Ru'u Kira Neged Pneichem, a symbol of blood, V'shura Yisrael. And they didn't know that Klal Yisrael is l'mala min hamazal. And they didn't realize that the astrological sign pointed to the Dam of Gilgal, of Milah at Gilgal. So Gilgal is the location where Klal Yisrael realized that they're l'mala min hamazal. Therefore, when Klal Yisrael rejected Shaul, because they said he has no mazel, because he's from Binyamin, he was born in Eretz Yisrael, Shmuel said, go to Gilgal. There you'll remember that at this location it was taught that Klal Yisrael ein lohem mazel. So according to Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz, he says the analogy to Ethiopians is just like the Ethiopian was conceived on the Teva from Cham, who had tashmish at a time when the mazolos were not functioning, so too Klal Yisrael are lamala min hamazal. So I wish everyone Siman Tov, Mazel Tov, and have a great day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.